Hello, everyone. Welcome back to your anatomy lecture. Today, we are going to be taking a look at muscles of the face, which is a little different from muscles that we've looked at before, which were mostly of the extremities, moving like the bones in every which way. But in this case, we're actually going to be moving a lot of skin, as well as different body parts of the face, or rather different parts of the face, because there's a lot of things that are helping to do all of the various actions that the face produces, whether it's like expressions of happiness, sadness, anger, confusion, or weird things, just like opening and closing the nostrils, or I can't do it, but maybe even wiggling your ears a little bit. But if we look closely, we'll see that there are actually quite a few muscles to look at. So, looking at the muscles of the scalp, as well as the face, and a little bit of its innervation, I mean, you can see that there are quite a few little muscles. So, some of these actually might sound familiar based off of the landmarks that we've talked about, such as frontalis, zygomaticus, mentalis. But there's a lot of things that might not completely be apparent at first, but when you say the word oculi, that means eye. When you say the word labii, that means lips. So these things are moving different parts of the face, but not just like that, it's also moving them in specific directions. So you see that you'll have depressor versus levator. And that's an important thing because just like every other muscle, very, very rarely will any given muscle do both like actions of flexion and extension, abduction and adduction, especially of the same thing. So it just generally doesn't happen. So in this case, it's not quite as like it's not exactly the same as what we've looked at, but a lot of the cases it'll either be, does it elevate or depress? Does it open or close? So just be careful. A lot of people kind of group those together, especially when they talk about the face, but we want to be specific. So let's go ahead and get started, and we'll see that you have various groups of muscles. So number one, the scalp. That's just the scalp, the stuff on the top of the head. But then you also have epicranial muscles, which are connected to the scalp. You have muscles around the eye, circumorbital, as well as the eyelid, nasal muscles, cheek and lip muscles, and then innervation of the head, which is actually what we're going to start off with. So to get started, let's talk about facial cranial nerve 7. So notice the way that that is written really quickly, because this is the proper way to write cranial nerves. So number one, with the name. Number two, with cranial nerve instead of just nerve. And then third and lastly, including the Roman numeral number of whatever number that might be. So facial, cranial nerve, and then 7, which looks like a VII. This is going to be 7. So do your best to remember that. But to talk about facial cranial nerve 7, it is going to be coming off and going to the face. So that's pretty intuitive, luckily, but if you look closely, it comes out specifically near the front of the ear. So facial cranial nerve 7 goes through the internal acoustic meatus, and then it comes out right near the stylomastoid foramen, right in front of the ear, or rather right medial to the ear, but it comes out right in front and actually piercing through something called the parotid gland, one of your salivary glands. Now, if you look closely, there are various branches that come off of it, and that will include branches that go to different regions of the face, and that will luckily be what it's named for. So, temporal branch goes to the temporal region, and then zygomatic branch goes to the zygomatic region. Buccal branch goes to the cheek region. Mandibular branch goes to the mandibular region, and then cervical goes to the neck. So, based off of the region, based off of the bone that they go to, luckily the facial nerve branches or the facial cranial nerve 7 branches are relatively straightforward. But there is one more branch that we'll talk about that will only be brought up for one muscle. But if you look closely, there's a branch that goes backwards, which is called the posterior auricular branch, which is named for where it goes behind the ear. So as we'll see, there's also a couple more nerves that we'll look at either later or one more today as well, but those will go to different regions or different muscles for the most part. So when you talk about facial cranial nerve 7, it's pretty luckily intuitively said that it controls facial expressions. So facial, cranial nerve, facial expressions. And that's going to be mostly what we talk about today. So as we'll see, a lot of these different muscles of the face will be controlled by facial cranial nerve 7, but it also does have a little bit of motor function for the lacrimal gland for tears, as well as salivary glands, such as the submandibular and sublingual, and then also a little bit of stuff along the palate and the nose as well. But sensation-wise, it is going to have some sensory innervation of the tongue for taste in the anterior two-thirds of the tongue, but also a little bit of innervation along the skin of the external acoustic meatus. Now that leaves a lot more skin of the face that's kind of like not covered, but that's going to be innervated by another nerve called trigeminal cranial nerve 5. So trigeminal cranial nerve 5. It's the fifth cranial nerve, and it is going to actually have multiple branches. And when you say the word trigeminal, what comes to mind? 3. So if you look closely, those 3 branches are called ophthalmic 5-1, maxillary 5-2, and then mandibular 5-3. So some people will mistake this for, V1, V2, V3, but that's the Roman numeral 5. So 5-1, ophthalmic branch. This is actually going to come out along with your motor muscles of the eye, or sorry, motor nerves of the eye. So along with trochlear, oculomotor, and abducens, ophthalmic 5-1 of trigeminal CN5 will travel through the superior orbital fissure. So coming out through the superior orbital fissure, you can see that it's actually going to go to the region of the face which is closest to, which is the forehead, the top of the scalp, as well as the front and top of the nose. So it goes all the way down, but does not necessarily go around the nostrils, which is going to be our second part, which in the upper jaw region, this is called maxillary 5-2. So maxillary 5-2, you can see going out into this region, and it's actually going to travel through the foramen rotundum below the eye, and then it's going to come out near the infraorbital foramen. So the infraorbital foramen right along here, this is going to allow to innervate the upper jaw as well as a little bit of the side of the head. Now, lastly, going to the lower jaw, you have one more nerve, and that's mandibular 5-3, and that's going to be going through the foramen ovale, the one that's next to the foramen spinosum. But as you can see, it goes to the lower jaw, but there will be other parts that also go to the side of the head, right in front of the ear as well. So this is trigeminal cranial nerve 5, and there's an important thing about trigeminal cranial nerve 5, though, which it actually has a few innervations of muscles, which is for something called mastication. So I want you to be kind of clear. Mastication with STIC. This basically means chewing. So specifically, like not necessarily using the face, but actually moving the bones, moving the mandible up and down. So with those said, those are the nerves that we'll be mostly talking about, but let's go ahead and move on to the face. And as you can see, there's quite a few little muscles connecting to different regions of the face, connecting to different bones and different skin and different, major parts like the lips, the nose, the eyes. So there's going to be quite a few little muscles to get started with, but let's go ahead and get started with some simple regions, including the scalp. So scalp has an acronym, which is SCALP, SCALP, and it's kind of useful, but basically, you start off with the skin, which is the outer region. You have superficial fascia, which is right underneath the skin, which includes some fat, as well as just general connective tissue, subcutaneous connective tissue. And then that's where you get to this kind of thick region called an aponeurosis. So the aponeurosis is going to be this thick, fibrous connective tissue, which is going to be mostly connecting these two muscles of the occipital frontalis, but we'll get to that in just a sec. But lastly, you have two more things: loose areolar connective tissue that just kind of helps to form a barrier between the bone and the aponeurosis itself. And then lastly, periosteum. Periosteum, which is the outer layer that surrounds the bone, and that means that we are at the skull now. So scalp, I mean, use the acronym SCALP, but let's go ahead and start looking at actual muscles now. So epicranial muscles are muscles right along like the scalp connective tissue, which does have a name called the Galea aponeurotica. So you can see the Galea aponeurotica right over here, and there's two muscles that it mostly connects: the frontalis and the occipitalis, which has a conjoined name, which is called the occipitofrontalis. So, to be honest, I don't like combining those two because their actions are quite different. So let's go ahead and take a look at those. So to start off with, we have the frontalis. Now the frontalis, as its name suggests, and very simply, is on the frontal bone. You can see that it goes from the eyelids up along like the top of the scalp, once again to give that 5 head. And you can see that that goes all the way up here. But look at its muscle fibers and look what it's attached to. The muscle fibers, number 1, are going up and down. That's indicating the direction of movement. Number 2, what body part do you think is going to move? The eyelids or the scalp? So in this case, the more mobile part is the eyelids. The part that will be moving up or down is going to be the eyelids. But specifically, when this muscle shortens, what direction does it pull the eyelids? So I know you're all like, muscle experts at this point, but it doesn't help to, break it down every once in a while. This is going to be able to pull the eyelids upwards to raise the eyebrows. So to raise the eyebrows, to give like a surprised look, a scared look, or just to wrinkle your forehead if your forehead isn't fat. You can see it maybe better on this guy where he wrinkles his forehead with transverse or horizontal lines. Now, this muscle is going to be innervated by facial cranial nerve 7, along with most of the muscle we'll talk about today. But in this case, the muscle or the nerve part that goes upwards is the temporal branch, and that would be its branch innervation. So luckily, we are not in the spinal cord. There are no nerve, or there's less nerve roots. So facial cranial nerve 7, temporal branch is what you need to know. Now, in the back of the head, you can see occipital bone with a muscle right on top of it, and this is occipitofrontalis. Sorry, occipitalis, because this is just the part in the back of the head, which is on the occipital bone. So this is going to be connecting from the back of the head to the back of the head, but this is going to be not really doing that much. Honestly, it just kind of helps to tighten or retract the scalp connective tissue a little bit. And that helps the frontalis to do its action a little bit better. But that's kind of it. I mean, occipitalis right in the back, a small muscle. But do you remember that nerve, that little branch that goes behind the ear? That one branch is what is innervating this. So the posterior auricular branch, but of facial cranial nerve 7. So, to take a look at our next region, we have the region around the eye, but also on the eyelids. So we have a couple of different muscles for that, which is orbicularis oculi and corrugator supercilii. So let's go ahead and take a look at our first one, which is orbicularis oculi. So orbicularis oculi is also a pretty descriptive name as well. When you say the word oculi, what do you think of? Probably eye, hopefully. But then orbicularis, we're actually going to have a couple of those, but orbicularis means that it's circular in shape. And it's not completely circular. I think there is like a little bit that's open, but orbicularis oculi is almost a complete circle, which is why some people will call it orbital sphincter muscle. But to be honest, I've never really heard that very often. So orbicularis oculi is the one that typically is the one that kind of gets used the most. And this is just going to be a round muscle surrounding the eye. Now, if you look at this muscle, there's actually a few parts to it. There's this kind of thin part right along the outside of the eye. There's this part right along the eyelids. And then there's one part that'll be a little bit medial. So the orbital part is this kind of outer peripheral part. This is going to be a thin kind of layer of muscle surrounding the eye, while the palpable part is going to be right on the eyelid itself. But the lacrimal part is going to be on the inside of the eye, which mostly helps to kind of align the tissues to allow for better drainage of the eye region from the lacrimal glands. So largely, a lot of its action is due to either the palpable or orbital regions, which, as you can see, has slightly different actions. So the palpable part is where you can close your eyes gently. So just, closing your eyes, and that's it. But if you really want to close your eyes, that would be where you squeeze your eyes closed, which is using the orbital region. So stronger closing versus gentle closing. Like here, you can see some examples of when you use it, blinking in sleep versus winking and squinting. So palpable part is softer closing, while orbital part is stronger closing. And once again, facial cranial nerve 7, but in this case with two branches, temporal and zygomatic. And if my rendition was not good enough, if you look closely, you've got palpable versus orbital closing of the eye. But really quickly before we move off this muscle, take note, we only said close. Like not open and close, only close. So be careful of that because that is a big distinction that you should try to make because otherwise the other one's wrong. So there's other muscles that will help with opening the eye instead, but that's definitely not this. So one more muscle right along the top of the eye is something called the corrugator supercilii. And corrugate means to wrinkle, and supercilii refers to this region that we didn't talk about, but it's right above the supraorbital margin, or supraorbital margin, and that's going to be right up here. And this is the superciliary arch. So you can see that this slightly oblique but somewhat transverse muscle, the corrugator supercilii, connects from here towards the bridge of the nose. So this muscle in particular helps to bring this region inwards to kind of wrinkle the or like kind of like the middle of the or between the eyes, but in a vertical fashion. So like that. Oh, okay, can't do it very well. You try it out at home, but corrugator supercilii, that's going to be helping to wrinkle the region right between the eyes, but with vertical wrinkles kind of like this. So a little different from another muscle, but this nerve or the innervation of this is once again facial cranial nerve 7, but with temporal and zygomatic branches again. Now moving to the nose region, we have a couple of nose muscles, and these will be along the bridge or the nose itself. So let's go ahead and take a look at the procerus. Now, in stark contrast to the corrugator supercilii, you can see that this is actually, affecting the same region, but differently. While corrugator supercilii made vertical wrinkles, procerus helps with doing transverse wrinkles. And I can't even tell if I'm doing that right. So just look at the picture. Corrugator or procerus is going to be doing horizontal lines like this, horizontal wrinkles. And in this case, this is going to be right above the nose. So to do that, look at the muscle fibers. You can see that they are vertical. They're making horizontal wrinkles because it brings the skin upwards. But a little bit of an interesting thing. Uh, I mean, it was hard for me to actually follow as well, but this is going to be innervated by something called the buccal branch. Now, buccal, what we would typically refer to is like the cheek region, but this actually seems to extend all the way up to here as its kind of distalmost point, and it'll innervate regions of the nose as well as the cheek and some of the lips. So Procerus, still facial cranial nerve 7, but be careful, it's actually innervated by the buccal branch. Now, the next muscle that we have here is called the nasalis. And the nasalis you can see right on the nose. And this is going to have actually kind of two regions, a more vertical part or an alar part, and then a more horizontal part, which is the transverse part. So you can see that colored in blue versus green. Alar part is along the wings of the nose, the ala of the nose. And this is going to be connecting from the nose, or sorry, from the maxilla to the nose. And then for the transverse part, it connects right along like this region of the maxilla to once again the outside of the nose. So these muscles will help with kind of flaring and enlarging the nostrils. So I did that, but you can see that you have these muscles attached to the sides of the nose, and this helps to flare the nostrils. So the nasalis, I mean, using both regions actually helps to flare the nose in different ways, but that's it. That's nasalis, a small muscle on the nose, actually connected to the cartilage along the sides, either transversely or along the very sides of the ala. But once again, since buccal branch could reach Procerus, buccal branch reaches the nasalis as well. So facial CN7, buccal branch. Now, this is where we get a little bit more specificity in our muscles. It's not just, open, close, up and down, although technically kind of is, but we have a few more angles now. So as you can see, there are levator, but not just levator labii, like lifting the lips, but levator anguli, which moves at an angle, zygomaticus, which is referring to the zygomatic bone, and then a few more that might sound familiar like mentalis, but let's go ahead and just get started. So let's start off with the doozy, actually. And this muscle is, I think, the longest name that we have of the entire summer. And this is called levator labii superioris aliquae nasi. So I've also heard aliqui, aliquae. I think either one's fine. But levator labii superioris aliquae nasi. This is our, I think, only five word name, and in this case, you can see that it's still not a big muscle. I mean, you can see that it's connected right along like the side of the nose, which is what aliquot actually refers to along the ala, and then it's going to go down right along the side of the nose, connecting a little bit to that, but then it's also going to be connected along the upper lip. So this muscle, believe it or not, can affect both by elevating or rather opening the nostrils a little bit as well. But because it's levator labii, this is going to help with elevating the lip. So it helps with elevating and protruding the upper lip, but also a little bit of flaring the nostrils as well. And in the same manner as the nasalis and Procerus, it's facial cranial nerve 7, buccal branch. So you had a levator labii superioris aliquae nasi, but if you look closely, you have another muscle connected to the upper lip. And this muscle right here is just levator labii superioris. So they both connect to the upper lip. They both help with elevating the labii, but this one does not really have any effect on the nose. And you can see that its origin is a little different as well. So it's connecting right along the front of the zygomatic bone, and then it's going to go down to the upper lip to help with elevating the upper lip. And once again, facial, same cranial nerve 7, and buccal bridge. So take a look at their slight differences. One of them goes from the nose, one of them comes from the zygomatic bone. But then, oh, there's a few more here that we'll see as well. So to kind of break up the, actually, let me show you this one as well. So do you remember how we had levator labii? This one is slightly different, which is levator anguli. So levator anguli oris means that it's not just going to the upper lip, rather, it's going to the angle of the mouth. So what that means that this is helping to lift the angle of the mouth a bit, just upwards. So this one is a little deep to the other one, so it's somewhat hard to see, but you can see levator anguli oris. It's connecting down here to the angle of the mouth rather than more medially just along the upper lip. So the main difference is that levator labii went to kind of the medial parts of the lip, while levator anguli goes to the lateral corners of the mouth instead. So this is helping to lift the angles upwards, but speaking of lifting the angles upwards, let's go back and talk about these zygomaticus muscles. So zygomaticus major and minor, these muscles are, zygomatic. So they're going to be connecting to the zygomatic bone, but look closely. And these two muscles right here and right here, these two small, skinny, parallel muscles are connecting to either the corner of the mouth for zygomaticus major or the upper lip for zygomaticus minor. So starting off with zygomaticus major, you can see that it is connecting kind of along the lateral part of zygomatic bone, and zygomaticus major is the bigger of the two. So it's longer, it extends more, and this is the inferior one versus the zygomaticus minor. So this muscle, as you can see, can help with pulling the sides of the mouth, or like the corners of the mouth, not just outward, or not just upward, but up and outward. And if you look at like kind of the gesture that I'm doing, you can see him doing it in the picture, but this is actually like also very important for smiling. So do you see how when you smile, it's not just outward, it's not just upward, it's up and outward. That's zygomaticus major. If you want to do a really big cheesy smile, that's zygomaticus major. So zygomaticus major, big cheesy smile, corner of the mouth, up and out. Now zygomaticus minor, and on the other hand, this is still connected to the zygomatic bone, and it is still connected to like the lip region, but the upper lip region, but it's going to be smaller and a little bit more superior. So you can see the comparison of zygomaticus major versus minor. This is going to be minor, connecting from the anterior part of zygomatic bone to the upper lip, right along levator labii superioris and levator labii superioris aliquot nasi. So zygomaticus minor, you can see right over here. And in this case, this helps with elevating the upper lip again, but a little bit differently, not for like, big smiles, but this actually can be used a little bit in like expressions of sadness. So we already talked about levator anguli oris, but this insertion is actually going to be similar to zygomaticus major, but it's going to be able to lift the corners of the mouth a little bit differently. Like not for big smiles because it's not up and out, it's only up. So like in this case, at least the way they describe it is as an expressions of contempt or disdain. Now, one more big smiling muscle at least is something called risorius. And you can see that guy doing his darndest. He's trying to make like, not necessarily the big cheesy smile, but just a little smile. So risorius, look closely at its like location. It's going to be connecting right along like the side of the jaw and then going straight across to the corner of the lip over here. So just like zygomaticus major, but zygomaticus major was not just up, not just out, it was up and out for a big smile, but Risorius goes just out. So what that means is that it kind of retracts the mouth a little bit, very gently. So if you're, doing that small, less, not crazy, but less obvious smile, I guess. Just like a gentle smile, a social smile. That would be Risorius. So Risorius, that's going to be a small smile right here. And that's a little different. I mean, look at the angle, very different. And in this case, it's just connecting right along the side of the mouth. So be careful of these. Think about the bones, think about the orientation, think about whether it's connected to the nose or not. Think about even like the depths to some extent. So in this case, buccal branch as well as mandibular branch of facial cranial nerve 7. Now, if you've got all those superioris, you've also got, and the superioris and levators, you also have depressor and inferioris as well. So to start off with, depressor labii inferioris, this is going to be depressing the lips from the bottom. So if you look closely, you have this muscle right over here, depressor labii inferioris. So this is going to the mouth region, or rather kind of like the medial aspects of the lips. And I'm not even going to touch that. So, I mean, take a look at this picture. Uh, uh, that's going to be depressor labii inferioris. So in this case, we are still in facial cranial nerve 7, but now we are down here in the lower jaw, so mandibular branch of facial CN7. And then similar to how you have levator anguli oris, you have depressor anguli oris. And remember, anguli oris means that it's connecting to the corner of the mouth. So depressor anguli oris connects to the angle of the mouth, anguli oris, and in this case, this is when you do like sad faces. So you can see that sad face, unfortunately. That's going to be depressor anguli oris. So this pulls on the corners of the mouth to do a sad face. And in this case, it's still facial cranial nerve 7. And then if you remember what the mental region means, or if you remember where the mental foramen is, you might remember that it's right here in the kind of like the front of the chin. So actually right here technically is where mental foramen would be, but mental foramen, mental region, this is where mentalis is. And you can see mentalis right over here on the front of the chin, unfortunately cut, but this is going to be able to pull on the lower lip to protrude it outward. So when you want to do like a pouty face, just like that, that would be mentalis. And it's still, mandibular branch, cranial nerve, or facial cranial nerve 7. And then almost done, but taking a look at our next muscle, we have orbicularis oris, which we also had an orbicularis oculi, but in this case, orbicularis oris, just like anguli oris, means it's a circular muscle around the mouth. So orbicularis oris, that's going to be this round muscle around the lips, and in this case, it's going to help with closing the lips. So be careful of saying closing the mouth or closing the jaw or closing the lips. So specifically closing the lips because it's connecting to the lips around the outside. And you can see that it's actually going to have quite a few muscles connecting very close to it. But orbicularis oris is this circular muscle that surrounds the lips. And this is going to not just close the lips, but also protrude the lips. So protrude the lips to do like a kissy face or a duck face. So haven't said that in a long time, but orbicularis oris, duck face, kissy face, protruding the lips and pushing them outwards. So this is still facial cranial nerve 7, but in this case, we're back to buccal branch. So not necessarily mandibular only, at least. This is in mandibular and maxillary, so this is buccal branch. And then lastly, the buccinator. So buccinator, this is going to be a little bit of an interesting one. It's not necessarily like, controlling much of the face, but this is actually kind of like the inside of your mouth, like the inside of your cheeks, rather. So, like inside the cheek. This is one of the deepest muscles in this case, and you can see that. I mean, typically there'd be muscles covering it, but Risorius is gone. You still have Zygomaticus major here, but this right here is buccinator. So buccinator muscle you can see is relatively broad, but it is going to be right along the inside of the cheek and the deepest, right along like, the teeth basically. So when you kind of like bring your cheeks inwards, like that's using your buccinator. I don't really know why. Like this is using the buccinator. If anything, this is stretching it, but compressing the cheeks, that should be buccinator. And that is going to be one of the deepest muscles. But buccinator, this is using the buccal branch. So BUCC, BUCC, that's where like, that name comes from. Buccal, buccinator, but still, facial cranial nerve 7. So as you can see, lots of facial expressions, and doing all of those facial expressions, you have a lot of you have a lot of little muscles. So just kind of keep in mind, what is it attached to? What angle or what direction does it pull it on? And then try to also relate it to uh, its region and its orientation. So quite a lot of little muscles, but luckily a lot of them are somewhat straightforward, but there are a few. So I think with that said, that should be just about it for this lecture. Good luck with your studying. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you all next time.